Shaltir. All the Guardians were protected against ranged weapons, so they did not have to worry about simple projectiles. However, those arrows of light did not do physical damage, but elemental damage. In other words, they were counted as magic attacks, and those defenses did not apply. Damn it. I'm out of MP. If I had some, I could defend myself with a spell. I'm out of skills too. If I had known, I should have saved a few uses for no. The fact that she had used up all her MP, and her skill uses, were all the result of their previous battle. In other words, she had followed Ain's Ulgaun's script to the letter. Shaltir's eyes turned bloodshot, and she bellowed. This was the expression of one who had realized their mistake after the fact, and who was determined not to admit defeat. Damn you. How did you obtain Peroroncino-sama's weapon? Was all this part of your plan? How did you prepare all these weapons? Where did you hide them? Was it a skill that activated after you broke those sticks? What on earth was going on here? It was as though the world itself was bending over backwards to help him out. What sort of magician would I be if I told you the secret of my tricks? A trick. A trick couldn't have summoned Peroroncino-sama's weapon. Well, that's correct. Saying so is kind of disrespectful towards him. Simply put, I was using cash items. You should understand now, right? Everything you have done until now has been dancing in the palm of my hand. A fully charged orb of light streaked out at Shaltir. She knew it was useless, but she tried to block it with the spit lance anyway, and then her surroundings were enveloped by a blast of exploding brilliance. Shaltir tried to think as the sacred radiance scorched her entire body. Retreating was pointless, and if this went on, there was nothing she could do but let him slaughter her at his leisure. That white armor had high defensive power, but he could not possibly be unscathed by a hit from the spit lance. All she could do was count on her weapon's life-absorbing properties, as she abandoned all defense and focused on an all-out attack. You. Shaltir gave voice to a battle cry that did not suit her face. A cold, clear voice responded to her. The odds of victory are 7-3. I trust one need not say who is who. Ain slowly raised an axe made of red crystal that shed a purple glow. It was a menacing-looking great axe. As she saw this, Shaltir hesitated on whether or not to advance, but in the end she took a step forward. After all, there was nowhere for her to run. Such admirable determination. This is the endgame, Shaltir. Diamond suit, diamond suit, diamond suit, Ain-sama. Will win. Those words slipped out from Cocytus as he shook his head. However, Demiurge, who lacked a warrior's knowledge, asked a question. Naturally, Demiurge was firmly convinced that his master would win. However, he needed to know more about the situation to make a logical analysis, and so he voiced the doubt in his heart. Why is that? Should it not take a long time to determine victory? Shaltir has abandoned defense for an all-out attack. I would have done so. I in the same situation. Indeed. Ain-sama changed his weapons one after the other. In other words, she has no idea what other weapons Ain-sama possesses. Under these circumstances where she lacks further knowledge, Shaltir would conclude that running away is a foolish option after seeing Ain-sama's bow. Thus, all she can do is close the distance to the attack range of her spit lance and fight. The fact that she can no longer use skills and magic only adds to that. At least, that is what I think. I see. So that's how it was. After all, only you could fully grasp the weapons which the supreme beings did not show to us, Cocytus. Cocytus shrugged. I only know of their effects and names. But I have not seen them before. I see. I think I understand, though I am unclear on the details. In other words, now that Shaltir is committed to an attack, Ain Sama has brought out the axe, blood-drinking flesh-eater. Thank you, Cositus. That blood-drinking flesh-eater does not look very balanced and seems inaccurate. However, it should be able to strike Shaltir, who has abandoned her defense. I mentioned it before. But the entire fight has gone as Ain Sama planned. I am in awe of his prowess. Ain Sama probably foresaw those developments. His insight is astounding, as expected of the one who gathered all the supreme beings. In all honesty, he could probably rule Nazarick easily without us. I am somewhat dissatisfied. His extraordinary ability as a magic caster, no, as a combatant island, truly an inspiration. Still, the battle is not decided yet, no? Ain Sama is still at a disadvantage compared to Shaltir, in terms of health. Albedo simply smiled, because she was certain of Ain's victory. There will be no problem on that account. Why is that? That man is Ain's Ulgaun, our ruler and supreme leader. Since he has declared he will seize victory, there is no doubt that he will attain it. Diamond suit, diamond suit, diamond suit, every attack ate away at their health. Shaltir's attacks restored her health, but the damage Ain's dealt with every hit was enough to negate the health that Shaltir regained. The Spiet Lance chipped away at Ain's health, turning this into something like a game of chicken. Every time that axe scored a hit on Shaltir, it felt as though it would chop her armor to bits. She felt bones breaking and flesh ripping throughout her body. However, whenever she thrust her lance, which dealt bludgeoning damage thanks to a skill, she could feel bone fragmenting under her assaults. This feeling, can I win with this amount of health? Joy filled Shaltir's heart, as she felt that there was still a chance of victory. If they continued trading blows, that might just be the case. After abandoning all thoughts of defense, Shaltir had thrown herself wholeheartedly into the attack, thinking only of seeing which of them would fall first. Shaltir, so full of anxiety, finally smiled as a light appeared in the darkness. This was because she had been calculating the rate of her health's depletion. The more she worried, the greater her joy would be. Ahahaha. Shaltir laughed as she struck and was struck in turn. Ahahaha. Ain Sama. It seems you'll run out of health first. The difference in our health will be what determines victory and defeat. And then, something dumped cold water on Shaltir's pride. It was a simple sentence, do you really think so? Shaltir realized her foolishness, as she heard the voice of the schemer, who had run her ragged, and who had controlled the progress of all the events which had unfolded thus far. Impossible. How did he intend to turn this situation around? Shaltir did not know how he would do it, but a third person's voice clarified her doubts. Time's up, Momongo Nyakin. It was a girl's voice. She had never heard this voice before, which seemed to be that of a woman pretending to be a child. It reminded Shaltir of a female voice she had heard before. If that woman had pitched her voice differently, it would probably have sounded like this. Now, what do you think time's up refers to? Engrossed in trading blows and mauling her foe with her weapon, Shaltir had no idea what that question meant. A look of bafflement appeared on her pretty face. If everything thus far has gone as I have planned, that means, the time which has passed has also been within my calculations. Now, what do you think that watch meant when it told us that time was up? The axe in Ain's hands vanished, becoming a pure white shield. With his matching white shield and armor, Ain's resembled a paladin of pure white. The shield rang crisply as it deflected the Spiet Lance's attack. Things being as they were, Ain's had probably turned to defense, because of that female voice, but Shaltir had no idea of the reason for that. As he went on the defensive, Ain's voice reached her ears amidst the clashing of metal. Do I even need to say it? The battle is over, and victory has been decided. Why? Shaltir was still at 25% health. How has victory been decided? Shaltir wanted to scream, but she could not. Super tier magic cannot kill you in one hit, when you're at full health. Then, all I need to do is reduce your health until it can do so. And it would seem our back and forth just now has heavily depleted your health. Shaltir desperately attacked, trying to shut her opponent up and block out the knowledge of her impending defeat. The clashes of metal against metal rang out continuously, the interval between them less than a tenth of a second. Shaltir's continuous attacks lashed at Ains like a storm. However, Ains neatly blocked them, with unimaginable speed. So skillful was he that it seemed that he could stand beneath a great waterfall, and not get wet. As he effortlessly blocked the attacks against him, he continued, "It's true that I am inferior in terms of pure fighting ability, but my magical defense is superior. Then, you should understand what I'm getting at, right? I'm about to make my move, Shaltir. All you can do is pray that I miscalculated." Kua. Diamond suit, diamond suit, diamond suit. Knowing that defeat was at hand, Shaltir continued her frenzied string of attacks. Though her features were distorted, her looks were not diminished. In the face of that, Ains made his final gambit. Despite what he had told Shaltir, his plan had not gone as smoothly as he had intended. To begin with, super tier magic was like a skill, and did not consume MP. However, it was still a form of magic, and he could not access it when transformed into a warrior. Once he dispelled the warrior transformation magic, he would not be able to equip his armor and shield, and they would fall off him. That would make it very difficult for him to resist Shaltir's attacks. If she decided to use a skill of some sort, he might not be able to secure a victory through HP damage with super tier magic. That would spell defeat for him. However, he had no other way to win. Ains briefly went over the timing of his actions. First, he would dispel the warrior transformation, and then he would use a cash item. He smiled. He had never been this profligate in the use of cash items before, even when PvPing in Yggdrasil. This was the difference between a game and reality, between entertainment and survival. Now, he blocked Shaltir's full tilt attack with his friend's shield, and then he glared at her. He dispelled the warrior transformation, and cast the super tier spell. The same magic circle appeared around him as before, and he prepared to break the hourglass-like cash item, and then he suddenly hesitated. This was because a wave of guilt flooded through him, guilt at murdering an NPC which his friend had painstakingly created. His hesitation was a fatal mistake. Shaltir did not miss that opening. She noticed the item in Ains' hand and thrust her spear lance, enhanced with a skill. Her plan was to destroy Ains' hand. Having dispelled his warrior transformation, Ains could not possibly avoid Shaltir's attack. Diamond suit, diamond suit, diamond suit. And then she felt something. Just as the spear lance was about to destroy the item, she felt something on her spine. That was clearly hostility. Someone hostile had appeared beside Shaltir, so obviously that she could not ignore it. Shaltir averted her eyes from Ains to see who that enemy was. And then, she found that there was nobody there. Ains' spell had created a 200-meter wide expanse of desert. Nobody else was there beside Shaltir and Ains. The hostility she had felt just now was nowhere to be found, as though she had been daydreaming. Not good. Shaltir exclaimed as she came to her senses, but by then it was already too late. The hourglass shattered, reducing the casting time of the spell to 0. Fallen down. With those words, a brilliant flash erupted between them and swallowed up everything. Shaltir could feel her body disintegrating in the incredible heat. Her carbonized right arm crumbled to dust, while the spear lance slowly fell to what was probably the ground in this bleached white world. Her face was shriveled up from the incoming heat, and all she could see before her was whiteness. Her throat was dried up too. In fact, she did not know if her throat had also been incinerated, so it was difficult to speak. Still, there was one thing she had to say. Shaltir Bloodfallen marshaled the last reserves of her vitality to give praise. "Ah, long live Ains Ulgaun Sama. Truly, you are the mightiest of Nazaryk's supreme beings." This was her sincere respect for the Almighty One, who had gathered the 41 supreme beings. The heat wave seemed to burn away her bindings, and though her body could not move, she felt unimaginably free. Someone who should not have been there appeared in Shaltir's vanishing consciousness. That someone was the person that had allowed this victory to take place. The undead could ignore just about any form of mind-affecting effect. However, there were certain abilities that produced similar effects, but which were not counted as mind-affecting. That person had used such an ability. Shaltir smiled and said, "Shorty." Thus satisfied, Shaltir vanished into a world of white. Diamond suit aura dispelled her skill sky eye, and her puckered pink lips returned to their original shape. There was a look of annoyance on her face as she began scolding someone who was not there. "You dummy, how could you let yourself get mind-controlled, even though you were undead? That's just so stupid of you." What's wrong, One-chan? HM? Nothing. Mare looked where Aura had been looking, but since he was deep in the forest, all he could see in any direction was trees. Still, he could tell what Aura was looking at from the way she was facing. She should have been observing the battle between Shaltir and her master. His big sister Aura could use a ranger skill to expand her field of vision to about 2 kilometers. This was why he and his sister were standing watch over the surroundings with the help of the eyeball corpses. Then, has the battle been decided? Ain Sama won, hands down. That's what I thought too. The form of Ain Sama, a being that not even the strongest guardian could defeat, appeared in Mare's mind. It was a sensible conclusion. How could the one who led the supreme beings be defeated? Then, One-chan, should we go collect Shaltir's equipment? Aura considered what she had seen before terminating her skill. Ain Sama should have recovered it all. We'll fall back as instructed. Mare knew his sister was in a bad mood, so he said nothing else, but obediently acknowledged her commands. Aura's best friend had been mind-controlled, and made to point her lance at the beloved master to whom they had all sworn their loyalty. While her execution was the expected outcome of such a course of action, she still felt upset about it. Part 4. He opened the name list in the throne room, and as expected, the space which should have contained Shaltir's name was blank. This verified that Shaltir was dead, and so phase 1 of the plan was concluded. Ain's heart ached. While he knew that there was no other way, the fact that he had personally committed and witnessed the act filled him with guilt. In his heart, Ains apologized to Shaltir. Then he gulped and turned to the gathered guardians. Then, the next step will be to resurrect Shaltir. Albedo, pay attention to Shaltir's name. If she remains mind-controlled as before, Ain Sama, though I may overstep myself, I propose that you should allow us to deal with it ourselves. Cositus and Aura immediately agreed with Demiurge's words, while Mare despondently agreed as well. Only Albedo remained unmoved. Demiurge's passionate words interrupted Ain's mumbling. We are fully aware that your orders are to be respected above all else, Ain Sama. We will grind ourselves to dust in order to obey them. However, as your loyal servants, we cannot allow you to be placed into danger once more, Ain Sama. Demiurge's gaze shifted from Ains to Albedo. If Shaltir betrays you once more, then we shall eliminate her as your guardians. We pray that you will watch us do so, Ain Sama. Now that he understood the guardian's intentions, Ains could not offer any further resistance. I understand. Guardians, if Shaltir betrays us once more, you may deal with her as you see fit. The guardians nodded in acknowledgement. Ains felt miserable as he watched them. What a pathetic excuse for a master he was. Even after going this far, he still had to let his beloved children kill each other. The root cause of it all was his foolishness. It was all his fault. Ains wanted to sigh, but as he saw the gentle expression on Albedo's face as she stood to the side, he decided to swallow it. Ain Sama, all you need to do is stand aside and watch. To whom should we pledge our loyalty if the final supreme being vanishes? Though we will not have been abandoned, we will still be lonely if all the supreme beings are gone. Indeed. It's very lonely to not have anyone by your side. Ain's eyes had unconsciously turned to the flags hanging within the throne room, his gaze resting on the emblems above his head. Yes, you're right. It must have been that way in the treasury too. What a fool I was. After muttering to himself, Ains turned to face the Guardians. Protect me, Guardians. It begins now. Their spirited replies washed over Ains as he grabbed the staff of Ain's old gown that floated in the air beside him, and turned it toward a corner of the throne room. There was a mountain of gold coins there, about 500 million of them. That was the sum needed to recall Shaltir to life. Normally, he would have needed to use the keyboard to perform the necessary operations, but he now knew that it was no longer necessary. The mountain of gold changed shape, from a solid to a liquid. Watched by the Guardians, the molten gold formed a river, which flowed to the same place. 10,000 tons of gold compacted and shrank, taking a humanoid shape that finally resolved itself into the form of a golden puppet, and its golden glow slowly weakened. Soon, the golden glow had vanished completely, leaving white, waxy skin and platinum blonde hair. There was no doubt that the person before him was Shaltir Bloodfallen. Albedo. Ains kept his eyes fixed on Shaltir as he bellowed Albedo's name. Please be at ease. It seems the mind control has been terminated. Is that so? Ains unconsciously touched his chest in response to the powerful sense of relief flooding him. The gesture calmed his spirit. Then, he reached into his pocket dimension and retrieved a black cloak before he strode over to the supine Shaltir. Her eyes were tightly shut, and her chest was not moving. She lay quietly on the ground, like a corpse. Still, the undead were essentially animated corpses, so that was hardly unusual. Something unusual, the chest he had just seen was so flat that it hardly seemed to belong to a girl, but to a boy. Not knowing where to put his eyes, Ain's gaze left her chest and looked elsewhere. The freshly resurrected Shaltir was naked, of course, so he had no idea where he should be looking. Ains was so panicked that he forgot that all he had to do was look elsewhere. His vision had sharpened greatly from when he was a human being, so he could see certain places very clearly. Shaltir's body was carelessly displayed, and her thighs were slightly parted. Ains hurriedly threw the black cape over her. The cape spread in mid-air, settling perfectly on Shaltir and covering her entire body. It's not like I regret doing that. I'm undead, so I have no sexual desires. No, that should be, almost no sexual desires. I was looking at Shaltir's body, because I was simply curious about whether or not she was designed with parts under her clothing. You'd never be able to take off all your clothes in Yggdrasil anyway, so that's why I took a peek. That's right, it's not because I was wondering if she had hair down there or anything. As Ains tried to explain his actions to someone, he approached Shaltir, feeling somewhat helpless. Perhaps the reason why he took so long to reach her was because he wanted to cool down his overheating head. Also, he deliberately ignored the female voice behind him saying, "If you are interested, I have no objection to displaying myself for your viewing pleasure." As Ains stood before her, Shaltir's crimson eyes opened, as though sensing the presence of someone nearby. She blinked sleepily and looked around, finally resting her gaze on Ains. Ains-sama? She sounded like she was groggy from having just woken up. However, he could hear the loyalty in her voice. Although Albedo and Nazaryk's administration system had already verified her allegiance, Ains was delighted to confirm it with his own ears, and he knelt down to embrace Shaltir. You? It was hard to believe that such a slender body possessed such startling physical abilities. Ains paid no heed to Shaltir, who was babbling in a thoroughly baffled way, and tightened his grip on her. Wonderful, no, I'm sorry. This was all my fault. I'm not sure what happened, but I'm certain that you couldn't have made a mistake, Ains-sama. Shaltir's ice-cold hands returned the embrace. They were vaguely uncomfortable, given that she seemed to be trying to grope him, but Ains did not stop her, because she was probably trying to verify her sense of touch after her resurrection. He pretended that he did not hear her saying, "Shall I have my first time here?" However, Albedo immediately made her displeasure known. Ains-sama, I believe Shaltir is tired, so we should leave her be for now. Indeed. Perhaps there was a penalty for resurrecting NPCs, just as there was for players. After all, this was the first resurrection ever since coming to this world. Tell me the details later. Before that, I have some questions. After Ains let go of Shaltir, a look of disappointment crossed Shaltir's face, and she glared sharply at Albedo. Albedo responded with her usual smile. He thought they would continue staring at each other as usual, but Shaltir averted her eyes instead. Yes, do ask me whatever you desire, right, Ains-sama, why am I in the throne room? Then, there's the matter of my body, and your treatment of me, Ains-sama. Have I caused any trouble? I was about to ask you that. Do you remember anything that happened? Ah, yes. Sorry. Shaltir, tell me the last thing you remember. Shaltir's most recent memory was 5 days ago. She had no impression of what had happened after that, until now. Ains could have used the 10th tier spell Control Amnesia, like he had at Karn Village, but even altering short stretches of memory would require a massive amount of MP. The staggering amount of MP needed to affect 5 days' worth of memories was beyond the limit of ordinary magic casters. Not even Ains and his extraordinary MP regeneration rates could do it. Of course, the resurrection process might be such that NPCs lost their memories of the past few days. Alternately, perhaps several people might have gathered to do it. He lacked information at the present moment, so he could not solve that mystery. Still, he could be sure that whoever had used the world-class item on Shaltir had gone silent, vanishing without a trace. It's quite troublesome when I don't know who's acting behind the scenes. The enemy might be waiting for a chance to strike at Nazarick. No, perhaps I should be glad that this incident didn't escalate. In any case, I'll make sure I thoroughly avenge myself on whoever did this to Nazarick. Ains quelled the anger which even his undead traits could not fully suppress, and gently asked Shaltir, "Are there any other problems with your body?" If this world was like Yggdrasil, then there should not have been anything else. The NPCs should not have lost levels, but he was unsure if the same applied to this world as well. For all he knew, the NPCs would lose levels, just like player characters would. Shaltir felt herself up before answering Ains, "I don't think there's anything." Is that so? After Shaltir answered, a look of shock came over her face. Not knowing what was wrong, Ains felt uneasiness welling up inside him. Ains-sama. What happened? What's wrong? My chest is gone. The faces of the Guardians twisted as they heard this, with expressions of "we want our concern back" written all over them. Even Demiurge had his teeth bared. Don't you know what you did? How could you say something like that? As Albedo delivered a rebuke on everyone's behalf, Shaltir's shoulders trembled in fright. Ains had gone so limp that his hands were about to drag on the floor. All he could do was watch Shaltir argue with the other Guardians, and ponder various questions about resurrection. In particularly, he hoped that Clementine and Khaziit, who he had met in the graveyard, would also lose their memories after resurrection, as Shaltir had. Still, that was just being optimistic. Since he did not know why Shaltir had lost her memories, he could not guarantee that their resurrection through magic would be the same as resurrecting an NPC through money. Just as Ains was thinking about these things, Shaltir had already begun tearing up under Albedo's one-sided torrent of abuse. As Ains watched the scene before him, he recalled a scene from the past. Diamond suit, diamond suit, diamond suit. He saw Bukabukagama, the elder sister, scolding Peroroncino, her younger brother, and the rest of his smiling guildmates. The NPCs before him were like his past comrades. Diamond suit, diamond suit, diamond suit. Ains slowly reached a hand out, and then stopped in midair. It felt as though an invisible wall of glass was blocking him. A profound sense of loneliness filled Ains' heart. It felt as though the memories of the warm place where the Guardians existed was little more than an image on a monitor, and he was on the other side. If he stepped into it, they would pledge their loyalty to him. That was a form of awe, and not the warmth he had felt when he had been with his friends. He felt that it was a terrible shame. Just as Ains' hand fell powerlessly, Albedo turned around, as though sensing something strange about Ains, and watched him quietly. Baffled by why she was looking at him that way, Ains was about to ask what was wrong when the flames in his eyes suddenly flared up. That was because Albedo was gently holding her hand out to him. After a moment's hesitation, Ains took her hand, and thus he was pulled into the circle of the Guardians. Albedo was the first to speak, and then the other Guardians followed suit. Ains-sama, please reprimand Shaltir sternly. That's right. Please give this dummy a good scolding. Indeed. She needs a stern lesson. You'll remember Ains-sama's words of wisdom, won't you? Although, maybe it would be better not to be too strict. ERM. Ha 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 ha. Ains could not keep his laughter from escaping his mouth, despite the baffled looks from the Guardians around him. No, that laughter did not just come from his mouth, but from his heart. After he was satisfied, Ains silently turned back to Shaltir. I have told Albedo before, but the fault for this does not lie with you, Shaltir. It is I who possessed all this information, but did not consider the possibility of this happening. Who most deserves to be rebuked for this? Shaltir, you did nothing wrong. Remember that. Thank you, Ains-sama. Demiurge, you will be in charge of explaining what happened to Shaltir. Can you do that? Demiurge bowed to show that he understood. Then there's the matter of Sabas, he will be bait.